Okay friends, one of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the car so the wheel's off the ground. After that, let's remove all of our lug nuts and then the wheel. Now let's remove our axle nut. Some penetrant in this area right here, and then we're going to continue on by driving the axle out of the bearing. We only want to push it until it breaks free. We'll go right in the center. Now let's follow that ABS wire to where it connects onto the knuckle right here at the ABS sensor. We're going to remove this bolt, and then of course we'll take the sensor and set it aside so it's safe. Inspect your ABS sensor, make sure it's in good condition. This one looks perfect. The next thing that we're going to do is come right over here to our outer tie rod end. You're going to find that you have a cotter pin on that. We want to remove that, and then we're going to remove the nut. The next thing we want to do is separate the outer tie rod end from the knuckle. To do that, I'm going to hit right along this side of the knuckle, being very careful not to damage my outer tie rod end boot, or of course the stud. Easy peasy. Let's remove this bolt right here. Now let's remove our two caliper bracket bolts. There's one here and one located up top. Once you have that loose, just keep that in there a couple threads. Do the same to the top one. Remove this. We'll set this aside and hang it so it's putting no pressure on the flex hose or the ABS wire. Now we're going to move to this through bolt that comes from the front to the rear. We're going to go ahead and remove the nut and then remove the bolt from this area. Now let's move along to our upper ball joint. We want to separate that from the knuckle as well. Take that nut, we're going to put it on there a few good threads, and now we're going to use our hammer, hit right along this area just like before. Carefully separate this and bring this down. So now what I want to do is, as I bring this knuckle down, I'm going to start driving the axle through the wheel bearing. Now I'm just going to pull down on this and we'll remove the axle from the knuckle. Now from underneath the subframe, we have a nice clear look of the inside part of the axle. That's going to go right into this carrier bearing in the center. You want to make sure you pull down this wiring out of the way. Then we'll take our hammer and we're going to carefully drive the axle out of here. Just be careful, because once it comes out of there, what else is going to be holding into the car? Not much. So now we're going to pull the axle this way. Let's remove the sway bar link mounting nut. Now at this point, we can grab onto this fork. We're just going to bring it like that and remove the axle. Now the next thing we need to do is take a peek right in here where we remove the axle from. Look at this shaft right there. Make sure it doesn't look like it's rusted or rotted or damaged in any way. Assuming it looks good, go ahead and clean it down and apply some copper never seize. All right, now it's time to install our brand new axle. I'm just going to carefully slide it up here like this. Now we'll bring this wishbone over. All right, now I'm just going to start the axle in on that shaft right there. Okay, now we're just going to double check it, make sure it's completely bottomed out along here. This feels great. Let's put some copper never seize. Now I'm just going to line the axle up along here, and then of course we're going to line this up with where it needs to go on that lower control arm. Let's grab our through bolt. Now I'm going to line up my through bolt. I have some copper never seize on the smooth area, and then of course some thread locker on the threaded area. Now the next thing we want to do is apply pressure underneath this control arm. Essentially we just want to bring it up as if the vehicle was sitting on the ground. Now at this point we can go ahead and snug this bolt up and then we'll torque it to 76 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to slide the axle into the bearing here. You can see it coming through. We'll bring this up, get our upper ball joint in there. We'll start the nut on, and then we'll snug it up. Before we go ahead and torque this, let's put our tie rod end on there. Now we'll snug this up, and then we'll torque both of these nuts to 35 foot-pounds. Go ahead and install a cotter pin on this. Let's go ahead and take our sway bar link. We'll slide it in here, put the nut on there. We'll snug it up and then torque it to 31 foot-pounds. Now we'll just snug these up and then we'll torque them to 66 foot-pounds. Now we're going to put this back on here. Put a little bit of copper never sees in that hole. Let's get our ABS sensor back on here. Make sure the piton fits into the knuckle. You want to use some copper never sees in this bolt hole. Now it's time to put our axle nut on there. We'll just go ahead and snug this up with our ratchet, and then we'll get it down on the ground and torque it. Now let's torque this to 189 foot-pounds. Once you have it torqued, the next thing you want to do is peen over the axle nut right into this groove on the axle itself. That's going to lock it in so it can't loosen up on you. All right, that looks good. Now we can get the wheel on here. Start on all of your lug nuts. We'll snug them up, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we'll torque them to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, we got our axle back in there. What's left to do now? Now you need to go ahead and hop inside the car. You're going to pump up the brakes. Make sure they're nice and firm. After that, take it for a road test down to your local alignment shop.